Hey, I want to chat today about the small town neighborhood effect, which is a thing I've been experiencing IRL now that after 15 years of living in big city apartments, we have moved into a small city neighborhood. Been discovering some things that actually really closely relate to how and why we operate the home team game development training communities the way that we do in terms of the scale, in terms of distribution. At a high level, what this comes down to is there's kind of two sides to this. One is you've probably heard about how people in small towns seem nicer to each other sometimes, or at the very least, it's the stereotype you might hear, as opposed to big cities where it might be a little more gruff, a little more kind of not paying attention. Again, I've lived there. I'm not hating on that. I've lived in Atlanta, lived in Pittsburgh, lived in San Francisco and Los Angeles, so I'm very familiar with that. And logistically, I think part of what's going on there is just realizing the odds of am I ever going to see this person again are staggeringly different in a big versus a small community. Right? Literally, I might go to the same bank, the same store, the same places on a daily basis when I live in Los Angeles, and still rarely, if ever, happen to encounter upon the same person working the same shift at the same time. There's just so many people everywhere. In contrast, now that I'm living in a smaller town, anytime I go to Home Depot, anytime I go to the grocery store, anytime I go to the corner store, it's often kind of the same person or people working there. When I'm outside, the people I encounter are kind of the same people. And this is, again, sort of the effect we partly have in Home Team of where the communities are intentionally kept smaller. They're human scale. It's not like when you're in some sort of massive, huge Discord or subreddit of thousands upon thousands of people where any given interaction might be you're only with that person. It's a fairly stable group of maybe a few dozen plus or minus people who, if you interact with them on one project, you're likely to also be collaborating with them on another project, right? It's likely to be the same people a few months from now as it was a few months ago. And this leads to better quality interactions with the people in terms of, well, if there's a thing that you're confused about, for example, either direction, you're confused about, they're confused about. If it's someone you might never interact with again because you're in a mass of thousands of strangers, again, in a subreddit, in an enormous Discord, well, they're confused about that. That's not your problem, or vice versa. In a smaller group of stable community, instead what happens is, if I can help you understand this, that's going to help me on the next team I'm on too, because you're probably going to be on it. Your misunderstanding as a group collectively will impact me versus your learning. If I can accelerate your ability to do this and improve the way you do it, how you write your code, how you fix this feature, how you integrate work, whatever it is, if we can correct the misunderstanding, it's going to help both of us in the long run, both directions. Do you see the difference? Purely because you're more likely to still interact with the same person on other projects. This is part of why strategically in Home Team, we keep a very active sort of just dynamic of you can switch teams anytime you want. It's not as if it's a traditional sense of, well, I'm on this team and you're on that team and it's us versus you, we're competing. Never that. Instead, there's project leads, each leading their respective projects, which project leaders are just members too, right? And any given week, a member might do a little bit of level design over here, a little bit of code over there, a little bit of music or sound on this project, or a little bit of art over here, or they could just kind of pick their choice that week. And the next week, it's starting over blank on which project currently, based on the stage it's in, the challenge it's up against, has tasks that interest me, that I want to show in my portfolio, be in the credits for, be involved in, that best fit my interests. And that interplay between the projects, again, increases the odds that even if you're on this other team, on this other project recently, and you have a confusion about how to do something, if I can help you understand how to do that better, it's going to ultimately come back and help me too, because you're more likely to probably come over to this project that I've been more involved on, and you see that difference of the small community effect. Now, when I refer to the neighborhood side of it, this is a thing where, once again, I lived in big apartment buildings in Los Angeles, and nothing wrong with that. I think there's many benefits to that stage of my life doing things that way. But it was, I think, probably 1,000 people in the greater 7-building complex. Any given week, month, I don't know, people would be coming and going. And I don't just mean going to the grocery store and going on errands. I mean moving in and moving out. Constant shift of who my neighbors were. Didn't ever really get to know most of them. When I'd see people even in the building, it wasn't clear like, will I ever see this person again? Odds are not good. Out of that crowd of people, maybe there's a few people who randomly I would see a few times. I didn't even know that those would be the few. For all I knew, they were visitors. Family, people who live there. In contrast to, now I've got neighbors who, one guy's been in his same house, I think 40, 50 years. Another neighbor, dozens of years. In fact, I think maybe the most recent neighbor we know on our street who's not us has been there for 6 or 7 years. And an effect that this has is that, well, again, you got the stability. But also, it becomes more a matter of thinking about, okay, well, how is what I'm doing affecting them? Here, become more kind of conscientious of even something little like, so I never picture myself as being a yard lawn person. I'm not very outdoorsy, not really super into that. If it was up to me and I just lived out in the middle of college, middle of nowhere, just be whatever. Basically, I have found myself taking better care of my own weeding my lawn, or taking care of vines or invasive species, or looking up and figuring out what should or shouldn't be there. Primarily because, not that I care about how the area around my house looks, but instead because I don't want it to spread to my neighbor's lawn, right? Because of a care for others. And where this applies here, again, sort of in our home team approach to these adjacent teams, is that each becomes more aware of wanting their project to be done a little bit better in terms of how they do their schedule, their updates, their code, their design, their artwork, because they know that those same traits and qualities and features are going to find their way into the other games around them. And just our care about our people who we know will be seeing again for months and together on future projects, and that we work together on the previous projects. Again, the same mentality starts to apply of wanting to each of us do better, to be a better reflection, to better help our peers on their projects, as well as even just this effect of sort of a raising standard, where when people come into your project and they contribute good music and good art and good features, and they fix bugs that were tough, you want to do their work justice by elevating your own level, by improving how well you're doing things so that their stuff is adequately showcased. So it's accompanied by work that sort of feels like it earns its place alongside what they're doing. Not with a big pressure, not with anybody bearing down on you or grading or assessing or none of that. It's all purely driven by wanting to do better because we want to improve things in alignment with how our teammates are doing things, in alignment with how the other projects are doing things. And again, it's not a competitive thing at all because people are crossing over between projects, including leads, even sometimes shipping on each other's projects. Current people who are currently leading projects, just other members of the home team, will still chip in on one of those things just because, again, we know it helps us, it helps them, it helps sort of the neighborhood that we're in. And a lot of it comes down to the small community effect that we've made efforts to, strategically over the years, break up home team. So it didn't just become one big old pile, undiluted, of growing more and more people until it becomes hard to be a new person joining that group as a lost in a faceless sea of a crowd of faces. And instead it just becomes a case of each community is small enough that it's fine if you have a week off. It's fine if you're not around, but your absence is more noticeable in a smaller group. It's harder to sort of ghost out in a way of ultimately we're there for our goals just as much as, not try to dilute this into a subject probably for another day, but a little bit like if you have an exercise group, right? If you've got a weekend sports group and someone just doesn't make it, well, you're not mad at that person, but you are wondering like, hey, is everything okay? Because I know that you're here to work on that. And the same thing, everybody here in home team is there to practice. They know that we're all here to practice and improve and get better at it. Nobody's hard on anybody else for your stuff isn't better. It's simply a matter of like, are you out here? Are you doing it? Are you practicing? And that ultimately in the long run helps us and it helps one another. And really, I think what I've tried to do, and fortunately feel very grateful to have succeeded at, is helping build a community where people want to help each other improve. And that's what home team's all about. And I just want to share that kind of example today, this kind of small town neighborhood kind of feel. Again, in a purely positive way. I'm sure there's also those downsides of HOAs and stuff. This is not that or about that. And I want to clarify too that like in my case, right, we don't have an HOA on my neighborhood. It's purely, again, instead driven by care about, well, I want what's good for the neighbors, right? I don't want them to be worried or anxious or not feeling good about what's going on in the lot next to theirs because it affects them. And the same thing can have a similar positive effect without anyone bearing down or without central force assessing in the way we have in, say, traditional classrooms and grades and things. Anyway, I think I kind of got the idea across. That's it for the day. Thanks as always for following along. Catch you on another day. Bye for now. Oh, of course, I'd like to remind you, if you want to be part of Home Team, literally anybody in the world can apply, right? HomeTeamGameDev.com. If dues are in budget, you can become a member sooner. If dues aren't budget, we literally have a sponsored program where you can apply at truly zero cost. No one will ever ask you for payment information. No one's ever sending you a bill or an invoice. And you are still getting services directly from me, from paid trainers, a bunch of included materials and so on, infrastructure around that that's made possible by our support on Patreon, because there's people who believe in our approach, know that we're changing people's lives for the better, and they want to help that support work for more people. You can apply at no cost if you need to, or again, you can become a member sooner and help kind of maintain our system, keep things going, help raise the level of what services we can provide by becoming a paying member of Home Team. But either of those are an option at hometeamgamedev.com. Totally remote, fully online, very non-traditional system. So I know sometimes there's confusion about how it works or how this model works, but at a high level, again, it's a small town kind of neighborhood feel to practicing game development consistently year round. Anyway, you all get the idea. Catch you another day. Bye for now.